So let's go ahead and start off by just taking a look at Emma's folder. So Emma has a folder. She has builds, which primarily should be just PSDs, but she's got a PDF in here. We'll check that out in a minute. That's all right. She's got edits. I would guess that these are things that she worked on that are parts of the end piece, which is exactly right. She's got her original scans, and she's got her image. Can anybody tell me if there's anything you see here that Emma could do better?
What is that image out there, the garden?
Yeah, I don't know if I was gonna put that in the final submission, but I just wanted to have that there so I could show people what I based it off of.
It's the cross-stitching piece that you based your illustration on.
Should that be in originals or?
Yeah, I think that's a good place for it. The other thing that you want to be sort of on top of, and I'm going to look at how you have it here, is that EP25. And that's something that's as easy as, if you do it as your first step today, just copy and paste that one element. And the beautiful thing about Photoshop is it's really not linking anything to anything. So it doesn't care if you rename it, unlike Illustrator, where it can become kind of taxing. All you need to do is just rename those files.
Photoshop won't do anything to them if you rename.
No, because you're not linking anything. It's all straight pixel. So you really, this is kind of a more forgiving environment in terms of nomenclature. So there really is no reason not to fix the files first thing today. So I'm going to guess that what is in this folder is the PDF that Emma made to print from. But I'm going to pull it out of there for now. And put that just on the desktop there. Actually, I'll move it there. Okay, so now we've kind of fixed this up. I'm less concerned with your initials and ID on this, but if they're there, that's fantastic. As long as the rest of your files are named properly, this works for me. And again, the idea of the nomenclature, the idea of naming files is about file management. It's also about working collaboratively with other professionals in a way that identifies your work and someone else's work, right? So that clarity is a real important part of being a functioning team member in a digital environment. So let's go ahead and open up Emma's piece. So far, so good. Okay, so she's got this piece. It's 37.1, 49, I just did something to it, that's why. Don't crap. 37.1 megs when it's closed. It's 350.5 megs when it's open. Part of that is because it has lots and lots of layers that are really important to Emma, I'm sure, in terms of editing and doing things with the file. So we don't want to get rid of that because that would make us have to kind of start things over, which would be silly. So I want to see this fully layered version. The fully layered version should be a PSD file. It should also be an RGB file because RGB is the native language of Photoshop. So when we're working with something that we're editing, we're always going to be in RGB. All right. Now, if we're at a point here where we're ready to make it into a print file, we're going to check a couple of things. We're going to check the image size. So we've got a 12 by 12 image, which will fit perfectly onto any paper that we have. And you have the option of printing to matte paper or to glossy paper. That's up to you. I have more matte paper than I have glossy paper, but as long as we have glossy paper, if you think that works the best, photo paper, you could certainly use that. I also have two different types of paper, a bright white paper and a more muted white paper. So depending on your particular concept, you may choose accordingly with that. I would say that probably the best to print on, unless you have a more muted palette would be just the regular photo quality inkjet paper because it's got a nice bright white surface. It mounts really nicely and it tends to show off your design. But I would say in Emma's case, she might want to use that thicker paper. It's not quite as bright white, but it would lend itself, I think, nicely to the color that she's got going on in her composition. So 12 by 12 at 300 resolution, that's fantastic. So we save this file here. And then in order to prepare our file to go to print in the print room, we're always going to make it into a PDF. And sometimes in Photoshop, there's a little caveat here, because sometimes in Photoshop, when you make a PDF, the information doesn't look the same. So if for some reason, when you make your PDF, we're going to put them right next to each other, they don't look the same, you have the option of printing it as a TIFF file. All right? But I'm going to guess that most of you, PDF is not even an issue.
Should we flatten the document before we make it a PDF?
Yeah, I'm going to go through all of that right now. Yep. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I don't want to get rid of all these great layers, they're beautifully named, by the way, Emma. Good work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's my best work.
It is. So here, I'm going to go right back to the parent folder. This is important. This is part of that, like, that final exam technical thing that I was just speaking of. I want to make sure that this thing that I'm making here is very clearly my print file. So I want to name it print, and I want to make sure that my tag is on it, and I also want it placed just in your project folder. So we have all your subfolders nicely organized that we can navigate, and then one print file. So if I come in tomorrow and you're out sick, I can print your file. No problem. All right? So I'm going to go ahead there, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off by just going ahead down here and looking at Photoshop PDF. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say save. And I'm going to save it as a press quality.
Do you know what's the difference between press quality and high quality print?
Yep, so the high quality print setting has some different settings where if you weren't working in a graphics environment, you could just use that. We could use that. If you use that for this, you wouldn't really have no issues. But I like to get students in the habit of using press quality because it gives you more options. Like if you decide that you do want to have a bleed edge so you get no white edge or whatever, you can use all of those other tools. So we're going to go ahead to save PDF. Now you're going to notice, and we always want to pay attention to this, that this is now the PDF that I'm looking at. And I had the option before to flatten it, but I'm going to make some option choices right here within Photoshop so that I'm in total control of what I'm doing. Not because I'm a control freak, but because I want to do it the right way. So I'm going to start here in my layers palette, and I'm going to say flatten image. Again, very important that I make sure that I'm in that PDF place. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look under, where is it? It moved. Hold on. I do this every time. I want color settings. There we go. You have to scroll down to it. So you go to edit, and then you kind of have to scroll. You guys won't have to scroll through. I do because I'm so blown up. But you'll get color settings right here. And here's the next place where this transition and doing a press quality image is important, is that we're going to work with an image that uses Adobe RGB 1998. Okay? We're going to convert it to a US web coded file. So what does this mean? What this means is this is kind of where we're working currently. And this thing that it was set on before is the monitor color, and that's fine. This is just a bit more standard across the board. And then this tells us that it's actually going to be printed. And it tells us that it's going to have a dot gain automatically. If I switch it to something else, it may switch. But if I go to US web coded, that will be a good match for the Epson coded papers that we use. And the dot gain tells us the gain of the dots on the page, how much darker that image is expected to become. So by making these choices here and telling it that this is our intention and clicking on OK, it prepares us when we make the changeover from RGB millions of colors to CMYK thousands of colors for Photoshop to make some slight adjustments to the image that will A, let you see on screen what your printer is capable of, and B, give you a more realistic depiction of the gamut of the printing devices. All right, so
how do you get to that dialog box again?
So you go to Edit, Color Settings.
Oh, okay. This is only for the printing document, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Anytime you're converting something from RGB to CMYK, you want to check this. So now I've got this here and it's an RGB space. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say Image Mode CMYK Color. And it's going to tell me that you're going to use this web-coded profile in order to make this change. And if you don't want this, so it's even, if you don't click this box, it will tell you every time if you're doing the right thing or not. If it doesn't say US web coded, then yes, you want to go to Edit, Convert to Profile. It'll tell you where right to go. And so I'm going to go OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and open her original. Right? So here's her original, and here's the one that we just changed. And you don't see a whole lot of a shift. If you look really, really close, you will notice that some of the greens are a bit more luminous, and that's because it's using light behind it. And this is kind of faux-ing that 20% of ink solvency that's there. So it kind of prepares this file to show you and to execute properly. So this is now CMYK, it's now a PDF, and it's now completely flattened, which is exactly what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and say save. Now, hers may not be the best example for this, but I'm going to suggest one other thing, and maybe it will be. We'll find out here in a minute. When you've converted this to CMYK, I want you to go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Now, she intentionally has gone for this sort of glitchy view. I want to get down kind of near to, zoom out a little, some of these guys here. All right. Generally, somewhere around an amount of 100, a threshold of somewhere between 7 and 13, and a radius usually somewhere between 1 and 2. I'm going to leave it right at 1. Will give us, I'm going to go higher here so you maybe can see it better. So you'll notice if I turn that preview on and off, can you see up there? Do you notice that there's just this little kind of outline on those branch? Look at that one branch, how it's got a little bit of an outline, right? Because hers is glitchy out, like that pixelated look already. If I overdo this, it may be a little too intense. Although actually in Emma's case, it may be exactly what she's looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That looks actually pretty good.
Yeah. So she might want to fiddle with this even more. But generally, all you are looking to do, and I'm going to show you in a regular file as well here in a minute, is sharpen this image to make it just a little bit crisper. So for those of you who have the luxury of 20/20 vision and you've never had an eye test, this is not going to make as much sense to you. But when you get an eye test and they put the little things on that like, is it clearer, is it clearer, is it clearer, and they do all their little knob turning, that's what you're trying to do here. you're trying to create a line that nobody else will see around the edges of all your objects that just seems to pull things into focus, like you're focusing binoculars. So we're going to go ahead and say okay. And we've got this named print, so we can go ahead and save it. And I want you to save this as 2 separate file types. This is very, very important, so that no matter what happens when we go to print this, you're prepared either way, and also so that I can grade your understanding of what kind of files you need to have to work with. So a good file to carry around in a flattened piece like this is a TIFF file. So we're going to do a second version. We're going to call it print2. We're going to let it sit right here. We're going to save it as a TIFF file. And we're going to click on save. And LZW is totally fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and close these. And I'm going to go ahead back to this area here. And you'll notice that my PDF is 22.6 megabytes. And my TIFF is only 14 megabytes, right? So if we look at the difference between these, the TIFF is a much simpler file format because all it's paying attention to is each individual pixel. And we've allowed it to be LZW compressed, which means when we close that TIFF file, it compresses just while it's closed. So when you open it back up, unlike a JPEG that changes compression every time you open and close it, this file is only compressed when you're porting it around closed. And that's why a TIFF is such a powerful file for placing into other documents, is that it saves space, but at the same time it provides 100% information one-to-one at all times. All right? So when you submit your folder to me today or on Tuesday, you're going to have one 300 resolution CMYK PDF and one 300 resolution TIFF. Mostly everybody's, both of these files should look almost exactly the same. All right? When you open this file, it's a lot easier to print a PDF. Those of you taking photography probably know what I'm talking about, than it is to print a TIFF. There are lots of decisions to make with a TIFF. So if you print one copy of your PDF and it doesn't look right, it's time to talk to Liz or to Amy about, you know, why is it that this doesn't look exactly right and how do I get it? And we'll probably print the TIFF with you. All right? But for all intents and purposes, this is kind of where we want to be. All right? So does somebody have, again, Emma, you did a great job here. And then you'll just drop this whole folder to me. Does somebody have a somewhat finished image that I can illustrate sharpening with? Like just a PSD file that you want to share with me? Yeah, Gabby, go ahead. All I need is just the PSD. What's that? Just close the file and just drag and drop it, airdrop it to me.
Yep.
That was the other piece. Okay. So if this is the file that I'm looking at to sharpen, you'll notice that on the side of your page, if you make this 100%, if you haven't already noticed, it's the pixel percentage, not the size percentage. So literally 1 inch is like 5.5 inches. So what I want you to do is make sure your rulers are open when you sharpen and shrink it down to what looks on your screen accurate to the size it'll print out. So in this case, on my screen, that looks about 1 inch at a time accurate, right? Because that's going to show me as close as possible to what's going to actually happen. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to flatten this image. Maybe. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. And actually, Gabby's is a great example because one of the best things to watch, I feel like trees are absolutely one of the easiest things to see if over sharpening is affecting them. So if we looked here and we kind of zoomed out in this area, in sort of the branchy area, and we increased our amount, I tend to start around 120. Let's go 140. There we go. So let's click on OK. So there's before and there's after. Look in this area here. Before, after. Do you see how it just looks a little, it's like a tiny bit. It's like there's this really fine, delicate line. And what that does is when the ink gains on that page, it makes your image look sharp on the page, right? Now, if we overdo it, let's go back for a minute. Because I think it's important to also show that. If I over sharpen it, even if it's a really good image, look in this area here. Things get more intense, but you also get weird haloing, especially in highlight areas like there. And that you don't want to do because then it looks over sharpened and less professional. So what you're going for is just that slight clarification. Another good place for Gabby to watch would be on her screen. When I sharpen it this much, I get a lot of digital noise, right? So look at the whiskers, lots of digital noise, lots of texture that's unintentional. All right, now what I do notice when I do this, however, is that she might want to sharpen just the layer with the TV on it to make the TV look a little more grainy like that, but definitely not the whole image. Does that make sense? So you're flattening, you're making a PDF, you're sharpening the image, and you're saving both PDF and TIFF of that sharpened image. The PDF and the TIFF should look exactly alike. All right? Any questions? All right, let's go ahead and work. If you're ready to print, we'll move your stuff over there to print. And if at any point you're ready to hand in your project folder, just let me know.